Well, hello, everyone. Welcome back to Childless Not by Choice, where my mission is to recognize and speak to the childless not by choice women and men around the world. Civilla Morgan here. I am spreading the great news that we can live a joyful, relevant, and fulfilled life, although we did not have the children we so wanted. Welcome to episode 115. That's 115. Welcome to the first episode of 2020, and welcome to 2020, you guys. We are in heading into our fifth year of podcasting. There was a little break in October and November where I posted no new episodes, and I think it would have been the best break ever. As well, I continued to work behind the scenes anyway. And so, at any rate, I want to just thank you for joining us for episode 115. This is an interview episode, and I can't wait for you to hear the story and the plans for this new entrant and business and platform to the childless not by choice demographic. So, before we get to that, though, before we get to our interview, I want to thank my Patreon contributors. I would also like to thank those who are giving financially, whether it's through Patreon or through giving without letting anybody know who you are. Thank you to those who want to be anonymous. I appreciate your giving anyway. And I do want to name my patrons, though. I want to thank Jordan Morgan, Sandra Carzado, and the Knights, Olive and Alphonse Knight. Thank you guys so much for being patrons and for giving to a platform that's trying to get the word out globally that there's a whole demographic living in plain sight. You might not think that we're here because sometimes we try to hide out, but those of you who get it get that we need to get the word out globally that although we did not have children, we are still desiring and deserving of a place at the table. So thank you to the patrons who help pay monthly to get the word out. So I have a guest, as I said earlier. I have Ms. Dr. I should say Krista Cooper PhD, LLMSW. She is a native of Hartford, Connecticut, of Jamaican heritage. She attended Oakwood College in Huntsville, Alabama, where her love of languages and the written word resulted in a change of major from pre-med to English and Spanish. While at Oakwood, she also studied for a year at Colegio Adventista in Sagunto, Spain. I think I got that. After obtaining her Bachelor of Arts degree in English and Spanish, Dr. Cooper obtained her Master of Social Work from the University of Michigan. After graduation, she worked as an intake and assessment social worker in the Children and Families Division, as well as working as a substance misuse social worker in the United Kingdom. Other areas of work experience include geriatric populations and mental health work with children and adults. In 2012, prior to the completion of her doctoral studies, Dr. Cooper accepted an assistant professor of social work position at Andrews University. While there and completing her dissertation, she began experiencing several health and life challenges related to uterine fibroids. This sparked an interest in exploring in more depth the experiences of women living with reproductive health challenges. Upon completion of her doctoral studies in 2014 and her own subsequent healing process, Dr. Cooper applied for a grant that would allow her to explore the aforementioned area. She was granted funding for research entitled Identity and Experience: The Lives of Women Living with Symptomatic Uterine Fibroids. Results from the study and its focus on individuals' story prompted her to start Reproductively Yours LLC, which we will be talking about more in just a moment, which focuses on reducing the stigma associated with women's reproductive narratives through education, story work, creativity, and community building. Her greatest desire is for women that currently live or have lived with reproductive health challenges to know that we are not alone. Welcome to the show, Dr. Cooper.
Thank you.
I'm so glad that you're here. We've spoken several times before, and
Yes.
I hope you don't mind if I just call you Krista.
No, that is absolutely fine.
Okay, thank you. We've had the great opportunity to speak several times before this recording, and I've just enjoyed
Hmm.
every conversation that we have had, and I'm just so glad now that we can share you with our platform and with the world. So once again, thanks for taking the time to be here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
So let's get started. You finally, according to one of the conversations we had, gave gave into the prompting you felt in your heart to start your business,
Yeah.
and we talked about this just before recording just now too.
Yes.
Open-ended question: what are your dreams for this business? What types of people are you hoping to help, and where do you see yourself and your business by the end of 2020?
Wow. That's a lot.
I know.
Okay. So, first question. What was the first
Well, the
question?
first part of that three-part question, I do this
Yes.
all the time. People are like, really, Civilla? Can you just ask one question at a time? But I
One
grouped
question at
it
a time.
together. So you finally gave into the prompting,
Yes.
that you felt in your heart to start your business. So, okay, number one, what are your dreams for this business?
So the biggest dream that I have for the business is for women to know that they're not alone, who have faced reproductive health challenges and trauma, because it can be a very, very isolating experience. So my greatest desire is that one, women will not know that they are not alone, and they'll know that they're not alone because they'll have a community of women.
Okay,
Mm.
that's perfect. That sounds
Yeah.
wonderful.
Yeah.
And then the second part of that question is, well, you answered that too. You said, what types of people are you hoping to help? And so, where
Mhm.
do you see by the end of 2020, just 1 year later, where do you see your
Mm.
business or your platform?
I would like to hold a series of events for women, including what I'm going to call reproductive slams. So, just like how we have poetry slams,
Hmm.
we can have a story time for women, a platform for women to be able to come and to share their individual stories, thereby promoting, community building, but also an online platform where women can come to the Instagram, Facebook page, get education and information about different reproductive health challenges, where women can also, again, because my big thing is really community,
Hmm.
again, be able to interact with each other, and also to do some public speaking and workshops. So
Okay,
that's kind of where.
that sounds good.
Yeah.
So, one of the things we also talked about was the fact that the cost of the average IVF cycle is about $10,000,
Hmm.
right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
so that was a prompt for you to start your company as well, correct?
Yeah, in the doctor's office.
Yeah.
Yes. Um, so back in 20, gosh, the years just go. I think it was 2016 or 2017. I had gotten some lab work done after a visit to the UK to visit some friends. And as you mentioned, I had several health challenges related to uterine fibroids, and went into the doctor's office because I was starting to bleed heavily again. And I thought, oh no, here we go again. And the lab work indicated that there were some things that needed to be checked out. But the doctor basically wanted me to go to the reproductive endocrinologist to talk about freezing my eggs. Um, and so I went, had seen this physician prior, some years prior, but hadn't seen him for some time. And so I had to wait an hour for him. And while I waited for him, I was just scrolling mindlessly through Facebook, and a friend of mine posted something by Tracy Ellis Ross, and I'll never forget it. I don't really remember much of what she said, except this one line where she said, "You are where you should be." And I lost it.
Mm.
I was in an office. It was white colored walls, and there were all these babies posted on the wall. Um, and I thought, really? Okay. I feel like I'm like the butt of a joke right now. And I got really angry. And my faith and my spirituality are very important to me. And I was taking a little hiatus from God at that point, because I was really upset with him. I mean, I was livid actually, because this isn't the life that I had signed up for. And so I'm sitting in the office, and anyone who knows me knows that I walk around with at least two journals at any given time with a number of pens. And so I whipped out a pen and a journal, and I decided that I was going to talk to God through writing. And I unloaded everything that was in my heart. How heartbroken I was, the fact that I was in this office surrounded by babies talking about freezing my eggs, and my body was doing things that I didn't want it to be doing. And so just as I finished, and there was a nice pile of Kleenex that had accumulated next to me, the doctor walks in, and it was very impersonal. Oh, well, your lab results indicate, blah blah blah, that type of
Yeah.
thing, but not really connecting with me. And
No
he wasn't
empathy.
even no empathy, and he wasn't even looking at me. He was looking at the chart, he was looking at the computer screen. And I finally said to him, because he would explain things to me. He was explaining that well, you could do IVF, but your anti-malarian results are indicating that your egg reserves are really low, so we probably won't get any, and or they'll be very poor quality. And there's all this medical terminology. And I remember he asked me if I understood, and I said, um, I think, I count myself as being able to, to follow along and educate myself. So yes, of course, I understand what you're saying, but my heart doesn't understand. And I said, you're talking about my hopes, my dreams, my life, but I feel as if you're sitting across from me, very disconnected, and it's difficult for me. This is really, really hard for me. And he kind of looked a little shocked, at first, but then kind of slowed down and was talking to me. But by then, I think I was so turned off by the whole thing. And so the nurse subsequently came in, and I asked her, I said, I'm going to ask you a question in two roles. I said, I'm a researcher, I'm a professor, but I also am a woman that is living, and has lived with for some time, some reproductive health, challenges. And I'm in a room surrounded by babies on the wall. These are supposed to be, sort of the product of your handiwork, right? With IVF and, doing all this. I said, but um, when women come here, nobody comes here for kicks. Nobody just says, oh, you know what, I'm going to go to the reproductive endocrinologist today, and have you inject me with things and retrieve my eggs, and maybe this cycle won't work, and do I have $10,000 to pay just for one cycle, or am I going to have money to pay for another one, right? I said these aren't things that people just do lightly. And so I said, one, do you have counseling services available for women and families, right? Because some women are connected to families, are married, etc. And two, I'm wondering why the demographic represented on the wall doesn't look like me. And so she went on to tell me that they did have counseling. And I said, really? Where? And she said, well, we have somebody come in. I can't even remember how many times a week. I said, well, how come I wasn't given that information? Because I've been here before and I've never seen that. And she says, oh, that's a really good thing to bring up at our meeting. So insert eye roll at that point. And so then I asked her what percentage of the population that they serve were Black or African American. And she said, oh, we have an Indian couple. And I thought, basic demographics have escaped you. So I said, okay, so I'm going to ask you again. And she looked at me and she was quiet for a minute and said, we don't really, you know,
Mm.
have anybody of that demographic. And I said, well, don't you ever wonder why? And she kind of got really quiet, you know? So after that, I don't know what she said to the doctor, but I was in line getting ready to check out and I was barely holding myself together. And I had a like a 3 o'clock class to teach. And I was thinking to myself, how am I going to pull myself together to go and teach this class? And the doctor came out and he rubbed my back and kind of said, you know, I'm so sorry. And I just really wanted none of it, you know, at that point. But I remember thinking, if I feel this way, I know that there are millions of women
Mm-hmm.
and families, you know, and spouses who are standing by, or partners, right, that feel helpless, you know, as they're watching their partner or their spouse. And you know, women who just think, oh my goodness, you know, it's a very hard thing to go through, and it's something that's so stigmatized,
Mm-hmm.
right? You think that you can, there are so many images of women that are plastered everywhere on TV, you know, on posters, on the internet, right? We have no problem sexualizing women, but yet we have a real problem talking about our bodies in general. And then what happens when things, you know, quote unquote, don't go, you know, or don't work the way they're supposed to,
When they go
right?
awry.
Or they go awry, you know, and but yet we have no problem with the former, right? So I, at that point, you know, I was standing there and I just felt something kind of within me just say, that's where you come in.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, oh, no, 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 no. I'm just going to be angry, you know, about this. Yeah. And so that was sort of the beginning of the prompting for me.
So the prompting, the faith and childlessness, the Christian
Yeah.
community, the nutrition and self-care, the
Mm-hmm.
understanding who you are and who God created you to be, and
Mm-hmm.
the fact that, like Tracy Ellis Ross said, and I think I'm thinking about the same reading that, or the recording that you're talking about, because I remember when that came out, it was being shared and reshared all over the internet.
Mm-hmm.
So several people reshared it to me in the group, in my Facebook group, the Women in the Childless Not by Choice with Civilla
Mm-hmm.
Morgan group. And so I'm like, yeah, thanks for sharing. I've seen it. And so, you know, the reproductive health challenges and reproductive
Mm,
health trauma, and
mhm.
now you have reproductively yours.
Yes.
And so I was intrigued by the list of people and issues you wanted to or have researched. And
Mhm,
so you're doing research, and correct me if I'm wrong, but based on the notes I took when we talked the first
mm,
time, you're researching Afro-Caribbean women living with HIV, for instance, or just being a woman, or being an immigrant, or being a Black female immigrant. Um, and I think you said the majority of the women that you've interviewed are Jamaican or Trinidadian.
So that was my dissertation
Okay.
research. Yeah.
Okay.
So when I was working on my PhD, I was interested in HIV,
Mm-hmm.
and noticed that in the literature you know, were articles and research about African American populations and other populations, and some with the Afro Caribbean, but mainly done in the Caribbean
Mm-hmm.
at the time that I was researching it. So this is probably 2006, 2007,
Okay.
and I noticed that within the U.S. it seems like there was less work being done with this particular demographic. And I subsequently found out it's because of grouping. So, you know, Afro Caribbean get lumped in with Black or African American, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's not a lot of teasing out, or at least at that time, of the data to represent that particular demographic. So I decided that I wanted to research Afro Caribbean immigrant women, and I did that research in the New York metropolitan area. And it took me, some of my committee members thought I was crazy. I had them, you know, saying, why don't you just do African Americans? And I said, because I don't want to. You know, I'm very interested in this particular demographic. My family's from Jamaica. I can just remember being in Jamaica, during my formative years, early teenage years, and just noticing some of the taboos that existed within Jamaican culture, which seemed quite paradoxical, actually, about sexuality and what it meant to be a female, and how you express yourself or don't express yourself with your body. But yet, blaring all around me was very explicit music, that was talking very much about the female form and sexuality. And so it was very paradoxical. I can remember being about 9, asking my mom questions, and it was like she would break out into patois and start telling me about how nosy I was and shushing me, and things like that. So I think I've always been a bit inquisitive, especially about things that are stigmatized. And so when I came to this topic, I really wanted to do it out of curiosity, and out of what are these women's lives like. And it took me a long time to even reach the demographic, probably about 3 years. And then there was the actual research. So that was for my dissertation. And then subsequently, after going through my health challenges, over a number of years, they reached a fever pitch, probably right around the time that I graduated. I was just in the doctor. I was scheduling my appointments around when I was teaching, because I was at the doctor so often. Um, and after I had gone through 2 surgeries, I thought and started talking to other women and realizing, hey, you too, I didn't realize you were having this issue, and I thought, well, if there's so many of us, that are, why aren't we talking about this? And so, yeah, coupled with my former experience, I thought, okay, it's time to start something.
Yeah, it's amazing how there are over 7 billion people on this planet.
Mm.
You know how many millions of us are dealing with this, but we just can't get to talk about it because
No.
we've been shamed. Society has
Yeah.
shamed us. And that's why your platform is so important, and so many of the other childless not by choice platforms that are all over the planet right now, that are just popping up like popcorn
Mm.
all over the planet. That's why those of us who are willing to not be shamed, so that we
Mm-hmm.
can help ourselves and others. Because I was talking to somebody the other day, and she was telling me that she was getting ready, and this woman has children, but she's getting ready to have a hysterectomy. And
Mm.
I thought she knew I had had one, but it's no big secret. And see, if I had still been keeping it a secret,
Yes.
I remember, and I don't remember if it was my pastor's wife who said something like, if you nobody can accuse you of your secrets or hold your secrets over your head if they're no longer secrets, something to
Yes.
that effect. And I
Yeah.
remembered thinking, because she said, oh, I didn't know you had a hysterectomy. And I said, well, it's all over my platform and on my podcast. I talk about
Right.
it all the time. And I remember
Yeah.
thinking, I felt so powerful in that moment. Not that I had
Mm.
anything over her or I made her feel bad or anything. That wasn't the intent. But
Yeah.
suppose I was still holding on to that inside my heart, like I did for so many years. The fact
Mm.
that I was having fibroid issues and accidents, and we talked about this, accidents
Oh,
every month,
yes.
and hiding it, trying to
Yeah.
hide it, thinking I was hiding it.
Yeah.
And suppose I was still hiding it. But no, I boldly said, well, I do talk about it on my podcast.
Yeah.
you know and there's a power to that. There's a
Yeah.
power to be able to hold on to yourself, and to encourage yourself, and to be who you are, no
Mm.
matter what you did or did not get out of life. There's nothing more powerful than that. And so the other thing I thought about when you were talking about
Yeah.
why society tries to lump all Black people together.
Mm.
We don't have a problem with being Black, it's who we are, but there are nuances
Yes.
between an African American Black woman and a West Indian Black woman and a
Yeah.
Brazilian Black woman and a United Kingdom Black woman. You know what I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying? There
Yeah.
are nuances, and I don't think that they should be ignored. And I'm glad that you stood up and said, no, I want to talk to this particular portion and research this particular portion of the diaspora. And
Mm.
so I'm glad that you stood up for that. And not just because I'm West Indian too, but even within people, and people don't know this because people think that Jamaica is the only island in the
Island.
Caribbean.
Yeah, isn't that really crazy?
It's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
even in the Caribbean, there's well over what, 100, 200 islands in the Caribbean?
Mm.
Even from one island to the next,
It's
there are
yeah,
nuances,
differences. Yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
know? So I'm just
Absolutely.
glad. I was just really kind of glad to hear you say, no, I want to pick out these particular islands, the Jamaicans and the Trinidadians, or and whoever else you
Hmm.
chose,
Hmm.
because sometimes we can fall through the cracks in other ways, not just in our childlessness.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
anyway, I just wanted to mention that a little bit. So speaking of the the fibroids,
yeah.
um, you and I had our conversation about our horrific experiences with
Oh, yeah.
fibroids.
Oh, geez, yes.
Being in the car, out of the car, having accidents. We're
Oh
grown
my
women, but we're
goodness.
having accidents all over the place.
Yeah.
But then you told me, and I don't even remember. I remember when my iron level was 7 at one time,
Mm.
and your iron should be right around 12. And you told me that your iron was so low it was difficult for you to breathe. I'm like, oh my goodness, you
You know,
know.
the other day I was going to another doctor's appointment for some,
Mhm.
something not related to this, but I had to look through my records because I was preparing, for the appointment, and I came across that it was it said that my ferritin was a 4.2.
Mm,
And I thought to myself,
good grief.
wow, like I'm looking at it, all these years later, and I thought, 4.2. Yeah, and it makes absolute sense, when we understand our bodies
Mhm.
physiologically and how they work, it makes it so much clearer how startling that is. Your ferritin, your hemoglobin, your hematocrit. I had so many tests done so often that I was really able to kind of start looking at the all the little abbreviations that they have and knowing
Mhm. Know
what
what they
they
mean.
were. Yeah, it's crazy, right? But you're like, okay, I need to understand this. But my heart, I think, just being able to look back to 20, those years,
Mhm.
2012 through 2014, and just have compassion on myself and
Mhm.
see how much I was pushing myself to work, to do all the things just to survive that we do on a day-to-day basis, but understanding how ill I was,
Right.
and the lack of compassion that I had for myself then, because again, it's just you know grit your teeth and bear it, just kind of get on with life. And no, we deserve to be treated with gentleness and
Mhm.
kindness, most importantly from ourselves, right?
Right.
Because the world isn't going to do it for us all the time. Or in my case, I moved to a state where I didn't and don't, because I'm still here, have family.
Mhm.
And so I remember going through my first surgery, they tell you you shouldn't pick up stuff, you shouldn't,
Sweep and
do
mop.
those things, you shouldn't sleep and mop.
Mhm.
And I had nobody here.
Mhm.
So I
Mm.
had nobody here. So I was doing that stuff by myself, and just crying, falling asleep in my parking lot after I had pulled up to my house because, again, your iron it was so low. So I just was falling asleep right, left, and center, because my body just did not have what it needed. And even the IV iron that they were giving me, as quick as they could put it in my body, is as quick as it was coming out.
Mm.
So I think those are the experiences. You show up to work, or you show up to class, in my case, to my classes or to meetings, and people look at you. And that was one of the things from my most recent study, is sort of like, this invisibility. So because people can't necessarily see it,
Mhm.
they assume you're okay, right? They assume that because you're dressed up, you look just like everybody else, right? But you're hoping and praying. I used to make like deals with myself, like, okay, if you can stand up for 30 minutes without without moving too much to the left or to the right, maybe you'll be okay. that type of thing. But it's going on, it's happening. I don't know if you've seen, Meghan Markle's interview recently that was done, and the reporter asked her, "Are you okay?" And she said, "People don't ask me if I'm okay, so thank you for asking that." But just being a woman, whether you've just given birth, whether you're going through postpartum depression, whether you are hemorrhaging to death from uterine fibroids or whatever, we don't get asked that a lot. Are you okay? How are you doing? Meanwhile, you're cleaning up your accident, or right, and you have to turn back around and go to work like nothing has happened.
Huge accidents too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Huge accidents. It just made me remember an accident I had at church, not the church I'm going to now. It was another church years ago, and one of my friends who's now departed from this world, God bless her, but
Sorry.
she took the chair. I'd had the accident and then moved it aside, and she just helped
Mm.
me get cleaned up
Yeah.
because and that's why it is so, community is so
It's so
important,
important.
and being able to have somebody that you trust to that extent is
Yes.
so important, because it does really help alleviate the shame that society can put on you when you just think you're all alone and it's only happening to you.
Absolutely.
you know
Absolutely.
so yeah, I've had the IV iron too. I've had to leave work and go to the doctor and get
Mm-hmm.
IV iron and just sit there and just sit there for hours, a couple of hours,
Yeah.
while the iron goes in. Oh my goodness. But people don't see it.
They don't see that behind the
Right.
scenes, like
Right.
what's happening. I used to have a schedule. I would grade papers. I would bring my work and I would grade papers while I was doing it. Now I'm like, you should have thrown those papers away,
Yeah.
and just let yourself be cared for. But again, I think that we're not that's one thing that I'm really passionate about, and I try to work with my students so much for this, about self-care. It's become a real buzzword, right now, and
Mm-hmm.
it conjures up these visions of going to spas and getting your feet done,
Mm-hmm.
all expensive things. But really, I think self-care is a mindset,
Oh yeah.
and it's asking yourself, do you believe that you are worthy of being nourished, of being cared for, of taking the time that you need for yourself, irrespective of whether anybody else understands, that you are a human being, and by virtue of you just existing, that you are precious, and you have value. I think those are the things that we, especially as women, are not taught. We're taught that our value is in what we do,
Mm-hmm.
or what we can produce, if that's offspring, or we're good at work, or we're good wives, or good daughters, or what, you can go on and on and on. But it's this external, the things that we can produce, rather than who we are as people.
And so self-care means just sitting down in your office, like where I'm recording you now. I'm in my office,
Yeah.
and this is my oasis. And I come in and I close the door, and
Yeah.
I sometimes just sit here in the comfortable office chair that was gifted to me by my brother years ago. And I can sit in this chair and think, remember, my brother gave me this chair. I could look at the
Mm.
pictures on my table, because people
Mm.
may think that's simple, but there are some people who, and we were talking about earlier about being that crazy busy, that you can't even sit down and look at the pictures on your desk
No. Yeah.
and think about your family and look at your family members.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
that's self-care. That's giving your
Yeah.
brain some time to calm down, and your
Mm-hmm.
heart rate to calm down, and
Yes.
just a little, it doesn't take much. Like you said, it doesn't take all the
No.
expensive spa things. It just means just relaxing for a few minutes and telling people that I'm in my office, don't call me.
Yep.
I'll call you. But just and they think you're in there working, and you might just be sitting here for 5 minutes thinking, okay, this is my break.
Turning your phone off.
Turn the phone off.
Turn the phone off. I don't want to hear the bing, of my phone. I don't want to see my phone light up.
Right.
Breathing. That's one thing that I do with clients and students, especially. How are you breathing? Do you notice how you're breathing? because breathing helps you be in your body, right? So if your mind is off, we like to multitask and think we're being really productive, but just stopping and saying, I didn't realize that in my intake of breath, my hand is shaking, right? Because I'm breathing shallow, or just taking that time just to inhale and just exhale, just be.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to be doing anything, just sit there. That is self-care.
And it's not easy for most people,
No, it's not.
but that is definitely self-care. Well, we
Hmm.
have just one or two more questions, but I have a quote here, and I don't remember if it was something that you found as you were doing your research or a quote you got from somewhere, but you can let us know. But I have it in quotes: "The best research is research where the results lead back to yourself."
Oh.
Was that yours? That was your quote, right?
I think so. I think I had seen it in and again, anybody that this work is so seminal. Basil Vanderkolk,
Mm-hmm.
he is a trauma specialist, does really amazing work. He has a book called The Body Keeps Score, and I think that's where I saw it. In there, I read that book, and it's pretty revolutionary, in talking about how our bodies hold trauma and understanding how our experiences, we embody them. Literally, we embody them. They're held there, and unless we know how to channel some of that energy, and understand ourselves through our bodies, then they get trapped. The experiences get trapped, and I think that quote was powerful when I saw it, in the book, because it's true, and I felt that in my experience of this most recent research that I'm doing with women with uterine fibroids. I found that out, that it led me right back to myself, and I didn't think that it would. It was very startling. It was very surprising, because we're taught to be detached. When you're working on your PhD, it's sort of like you're the researcher, and but really, I think that the best research does.
Mm. Yeah, that
It
was
really does.
amazing. Yeah,
Yeah.
that hit me. That really, just stood. I'm gonna have to do some research on that author then.
Yeah.
And the author's name, I'll see if I can get a link in the show notes to that. You said what was the author's name? Basil
Basil Vanderkolk.
Vanderkolk.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. I'll have to see if I can find anything and link it in the show notes. But the last question I have for you. You said you're working on writing a paper that includes the arts. So, can you tell us any more about the paper and how you're looking to use art on your
Hmm.
platform?
Yeah. So essentially, what you're referring to is the research that I'm doing right now.
Mm-hmm.
So I've collected the data, and I am analyzing, and the next part is bringing it back to the participants to get their feedback on the results that I've come up with. But one of the questions that I asked in the research is, if they had a blank canvas and they could depict their experience, what would it look like? And they describe it to me, and I got thinking, that would be pretty amazing, to utilize the arts with regard to reproductive health, because I'm a writer. I've written since I was really, really, really young, and I'm on a journey with my writing
Mm-hmm.
right now. But I think that, especially topics that are very stigmatized, that the arts have a lot to offer us. And what I mean by the arts is writing, is it could be poetry, it could be spoken word, it could be drawing, it could be, there's so much that encompasses the arts. But I think that each discipline, each um, platform has something different to offer. And I think, when we embody our experiences, the arts have a lot to say. It's a really wonderful medium to be able to communicate feeling and emotion and story. Story work is a big part of what I intend to do with Reproductively Yours. I think that our stories hold so much power, and know that they do. And we often don't tap into them. for many different reasons. I think there's sometimes not a premium placed on understanding who we are in the context of story. And so I really want to help women embrace their stories, but also to delve into story as well with them.
Wow, that's going to be. So you guys are hearing this. This is another platform that's coming online for and about the childless not by choice demographic, but it's going to include the arts. I just think that is so awesome. And so I just can't wait to see more of the platform. And I know that the rest of us cannot wait as well, the rest of the demographic. So we're looking forward to all of the great things you have to offer the demographic and to people who don't fit the demographic, but will be able to see more of how we feel. They'll actually literally be able to see what it is that we deal with and go through and how we're feeling and how
Hmm.
we're making our way through life and through this world. So
Yeah.
I can't wait to see it get started. Did I miss anything before we close out? Did anything you want to tell the world before we go?
No, just that I'm grateful for the opportunity to be on here with you, to share, our stories as well. But also, just I think in reflecting on our conversation, is that I said this last year, and I startled myself by saying it, but um, oftentimes when we have traumatic experiences, especially, we look back and think, oh, you know,
Mm-hmm.
it was horrible, it was traumatic, and they are all of those things. But in my experience, I can I can say that although it was painful, although I'm still navigating, certain things, I'm grateful that I went through it, because I feel that had I not, I don't know that this business would have gotten started. I don't know that I would understand myself in the way that I do now. And I know that when I sit across from another woman and she's explaining some of the things she's been through, although I'm not her and she uniquely embodies her own story,
Mm-hmm.
I can look across at her and say, me too.
Yeah, and mean it.
I mean it.
Wow, that's pretty awesome. And so thank you so much for sharing this time with us today,
Thank
Krista. Thank you
you.
very much for being here. And to the listeners, please feel free. I'm going to put the contact information for Krista in the show notes. And
Hmm.
so please feel free to reach out to her, to like her page on Facebook, all of these things as she gets going through 2020 with this awesome platform that she has created and is creating. Thank you so very much, Krista. It's totally,
Thank you.
truly appreciated. And thanks, you guys, for listening. Next month is going to be another great interview, but more on that later. Thanks for tuning in to episode 115, the first episode of 2020. I can't wait to share the whole rest of the year with you. We have some great things coming up, and I'll talk to you guys again later. Have a great one. Bye.